Republican Representative Steve Scalise got asked about the devastating mass shooting in Nashville, Tennessee, where 3 children were killed and 3 adults. This was at the Covenant School, again in Nashville, Tennessee. And I want to take a look at this response because it's so wrong and so backwards from Steve Scalise, and then discuss the facts in terms of what we should be focusing on, what we should be addressing and implementing. And the question he gets asked is, what should Congress be doing to prevent future tragedies like this one? And a few things before we dive into this clip. Number one, in a moment like this, and when we witness a tragedy like this, and these moments come far too often, it is important to recognize and feel for the individuals impacted, both those who lost their life and also those who loved those who lost their life. And also, us collectively, it is our job to, I would say, figure out how to, but from what we already know, advocate for and push for, and then in the case of Steve Scalise and other elected officials, implement policies that would help to prevent tragedies like this one from happening in the future and prevent these from being so common in the United States of America. And the individual who was deranged and did the horrifying actions that they did, they are responsible for those actions. 100%. We are responsible. And Steve Scalise is responsible. And elected officials, most importantly, are responsible for figuring out, again, I say, but just implementing from what we already know, common sense reform and common sense legislation and policies that would help to prevent the devastation that we witness far too often. And so with all that being said, I'll talk more specifically. Of course, I'm referencing gun control because that is what individuals like Steve Scalise actively, constantly stand against. Even though, of course, we should invest in mental health and school security and generally invest in communities so that the environment is one that yields the best outcomes for its individual, and also gun control. But that's the one that is so aggressively stood against by too many of our elected officials, specifically within the Republican Party. We'll talk more about the facts of how we decrease gun violence after this.
The first thing in any kind of tragedy I do is, as I pray for the victims, pray for their families. I really get angry when I see people trying to politicize it for their own personal agenda, especially when we don't even know the facts. There are facts coming out. It looks like the shooter originally went.
Here, I'll go back there and we'll watch a little bit more of this in a second. But him saying he gets mad when people politicize a mass shooting like this, what he means is when individuals, because he's referencing those who are for gun control, are talking about how we prevent future things like this. That's what he's talking about. The way he's using that term is negatively. It is not a negative action. It is not dishonestly politicizing this moment and the countless moments that we witness like it to call for, beg, plead for change. And we know, again, we'll get into it more specifically in a second, that one of the ways we do that, one of the major ways that we should not be ignoring, is by implementing common sense gun control policy. We'll dive more specifically into it. It is so enraging to wave it all off as people politicizing this. No, like I said, we're begging for change so that we don't keep seeing this. We can't just sit here and witness time and time again devastation and go, whatever. No, we have to actually push for change. And it's a multifaceted approach, 100%. And we can't be ignoring a major part of that multifaceted approach, which Steve Scalise is not just ignoring, but actively standing against one of the solutions. Gosh, these are human lives we're talking about. Get over the campaign contributions or the broken, distorted ideology you have when it comes to the Second Amendment, your misinterpretation of what that means, and actually care about solving the problem and not just giving your prayers, as he said. Prayers would be perfectly beautiful if they were running parallel to you pushing for change. You have a position of power. Use it for good. I'm telling y'all, okay, we're going to watch the rest of the clip while I calm down.
Our own personal agenda, especially when we don't even know the facts. There are facts coming out. It looks like the shooter originally went to another school that had much stronger security, and ultimately went to this school. Let's get the facts, and let's work to see if there's something that we can do to help secure schools. We've talked about things that we can do, and it just seems like on the other side, all they want to do is take guns away from law-abiding citizens.
So when we have these conversations, it is impossible to know, similar to how we talk about with climate change. You can't know if one individual weather event was caused by climate change, but you can say, as far as the trend goes, more extreme weather events will happen because of climate change and are happening because of climate change. And it's the same thing here. We can't know for certain if one particular tragedy, one particular mass shooting, one particular gun violence situation, if that would have not happened, if there already was implemented a particular gun control policy. But we do know on the societal basis, we would see less gun violence, we would see less mass shootings if we had more common sense, reasonable regulations when it comes to guns. What sets us apart in terms of guns from every other developed country that doesn't see the gun violence that we see? Number one, how much gun violence we see, that sets us apart. And number two, how many guns and how unregulated our firearm industry is. Connect the dots. And before we take a look at a moment here from Democratic Representative highlighting what I just was here from CNN, a study published in January by a leading nonprofit organization that focuses on gun violence prevention found that there's a direct correlation in states with weaker gun laws and higher rates of gun deaths, including homicides, suicides, and accidental killings. And then here you have gun violence by state. And if you look at it ranked, the top 10 highest states in terms of gun deaths, the highest gun death rates, 9 out of 10 are red states. But the evidence doesn't matter to many people. This is human life we're talking about. And people are purposefully ignorant or oblivious or just completely ignore the facts for political purposes, to support some broken ideology or whatever it might be. And here is Maxwell Frost, Democratic Representative, highlighting that.
Objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because I am furious. Angry that 3 kids died today in Nashville, Tennessee. Angry that hundreds of parents had to cry their eyes out today, not knowing if their child would come home from school. And angry that we have to live day after day when we turn on the news to see rampant gun violence claiming life after life. And all of this is because politicians in this chamber that have been bought and paid for by the NRA, that put profits over people, over human lives. Cowards who wasted our time last week, passing a parental bill of rights, not giving a damn about the rights of children to be able to go to their classroom without the fear of being gunned down due to senseless gun violence. It is likely that at this moment, the next mass shooter is planning their shooting. What will this chamber do about it? I filed my last bill last week to simply create a federal office of gun violence prevention. 3 kids are dead today, and every day that we wait, 100 more people die. I pray to God that there are some Republicans in this chamber that can help support my legislation to save lives. I yield back my time.
Absolutely. It couldn't be more clear. If elected officials, but more specifically Republican elected officials, would just get on board with reasonable, proper, common sense gun control legislation, we can make such a big difference. Whether it be universal background checks, enhancing, expanding, implementing red flag laws, banning assault weapons, banning high capacity magazines, raising the age to buy firearms, And it goes on and on. There are countless very reasonable policies that could be implemented if many within the Republican Party would just get on board with it. And do they care about even their own constituents? They talk about crime this, crime that, as if they're concerned. But as we recently talked about within some context on the show, the murder rate in red states or states that voted for Trump in the presidential election is 40% higher than those that voted for Biden. That's reflective of state policies in a major way. And the murder rate's 40% higher. Now, that's not just guns, but we know guns plays a big role in that. Do they care about that? Do they care about all these different things that they talk about? But when it comes time to solve these issues, they're nowhere to be found, or they're ready to distract from some of the primary solutions. And we can talk about all these different areas that will make a difference with crime generally, as I mentioned, the murder rate, gun violence specifically. But one of the big parts of that is regulating the guns. And to not engage with that is disturbingly dishonest.